Hey, it's Mirna from Trainer's Toolbox. Welcome to the Trainer's Toolbox podcast, a place where you can discover practical and effective tools and tips to make your workshops more insightful, engaging, and memorable. You are at the right place if you're looking to become the best trainer you can be and design truly impactful learning experiences. Ready? Let's dive in. Time management is a bit of a super skill of mine. I love keeping time under control, managing it well, ensuring that everything runs smoothly. And I love helping other trainers, both in the context of train the trainer and in advanced facilitation training, to work on their own time management skills. And today I'm sharing with you 15 different tips that I discovered through those conversations that will help you with your time management too. They're 15, don't get scared, they're very short to the point, practical, and you won't need all of them. The goal is that by going through these 15, you actually choose one or two that will really be important for you, that you can implement first. You work on actually using them and implementing them in your own time management, and then see where that takes you, and then add on the next tips and include more. If 15 seems a lot, worry not, you can download also the handout in which I'm outlining all 15 in one place, and you can also print it out as a permanent reminder of what to keep in mind for your own time management. But before I dive into the practical tips, let me just touch briefly why time management in workshops really matters. And it's not about looking professional, finishing sharp on time, although that's a good feeling too, but it's not about that. It's not about covering all the content we had and making sure everything is wrapped up. No, it's about learning, about the depth of learning. If I don't have time management under control, sometimes I will have to compromise and cut maybe really important and deep places in participants' learning. Maybe I won't allow them enough time to process and reflect. Or maybe I'll need to cut an activity short, and that will actually sabotage the learning in that activity. I might want to cut some activities short, but I want to be very intentional about that, and I want to make sure it does not sabotage the learning. And also, one of the most biggest traps that happen in learning is that closing gets sabotaged because of poor time management. So I do a really nice workshop, we work on many topics, people learn many things, and then I keep the closing too short for them to actually be able to process and integrate and digest really valuable takeaways and main focus areas for them. Maybe I still ask them, what were your main takeaways? What did you really learn? But if I don't allow enough time for that process of comprehension and processing to happen within my closing, then that closing is not very useful and learning doesn't really happen. So some of my own main reasons why I want to keep time under control are to ensure the depth of learning happens, ensure that I protect the most important bits in learning, and ensure that closing is really properly protected. But let's get straight into the tips and share some more practical side of things of how can we go about time management. So probably the first and most important tip I can share is have clear goals in mind for your session. I cannot overestimate this enough or over highlight that enough. Have clear goals for the session and for each learning step and learning block within the session. And while it sounds basic, clear goals are really what enables you to make quick and sharp decisions on what to cut, when to allow to go deeper or digress a bit, and when to really push people back onto the next step or back into the process. Clear goals are your ultimate criteria, your ultimate compass to know when to move in which direction. I'll give you an example. Let's say I have a get to know part of my workshop, and in it participants diverge a bit. They start talking about a bit more personal things and they go a bit deeper into personal sharing. Do I want to cut that, or do I want to sacrifice some time for sake of that? It completely depends on my goals. If I know this workshop will go deep, and if I know my goals are that they really feel safe and that they really feel connected and supportive of each other,
I will probably allow that part. I will sacrifice something else, and I will really protect the space where they connected and they connected deeper, because I know how importantly and well it will serve my goals later down the line. But if instead our workshop is very cognitive, very individual, they don't need a lot of connection, they don't need a lot of support of others, it's more about cognitive processing for themselves, then I will definitely route them back onto the next step and next activity and next agenda, and gently shorten that conversation and that personal sharing, because I want to protect the time for maybe individual reflection later, or to go deeper into specific questions later on. And that is right now maybe more important for my goals than their sharing. So, almost the same workshop maybe in terms of content, but completely different decision of when to move ahead and when to give them more space or time depending on my goals. And that happens a million times within my workshop, right? So for this, I really need to be aware of the goals of the whole workshop, but also of the goals of the specific activity. How is it contributing to the next activity? How are all the activities contributing and summing up towards the final big activity or the closing? And how is each of the activities supporting those goals? Speaking of which, that's right into the tip number 2. When you have clear goals, you also want to have strong clarity how each piece of your content and each of the activities actually connect to those goals. Which of the activities are really crucial? For example, again, if I'm building a deep, vulnerable process in which people will need to be connected and honest and feel safe, feel very safe, then my get to know is a very important piece that contributes to that a lot. And kind of trust building, which by the way is one of the topics I'll speak in one of the next episodes. So stay tuned and subscribe if you want to be the first one to know when trust building comes into the conversation. But different activities I can only choose to shorten or not if I actually know really clearly how are they serving the goal, which are the crucial ones, which are more important. So each of the activities, of course, will have a goal of its own within the agenda, and it will in a certain way be connected with activities before and after. But I'll also want to connect it with that big ultimate goal, so I could easily zoom out and say, hey, which activity do I actually need to cut? Which activity do I actually need to shorten? So that connection, clear connection between activities and session goals are crucial. And one more very connected thing, these first 3 tips really go together. I hope you're seeing that as well. Tip number 3 is having super clarity on your priorities. And priorities, I mean in your agenda, knowing exactly which activities are activities we call A activities. So, priority A, the first, most important, and which are the B activities. So A are must have, B are nice to have. A activities mean they're necessary for goals to actually happen. They're crucial. Without them, the process will not work. Without them, something is broken. Without them, one of the key learning points is lost. That's my A activities, my must-haves. B activities are, hey, I'm building a nicer transition here. I'm allowing a bit more time for people to relax and integrate. I'm exploring some additional sides of this issue. And B creates some really nice insights, but they're not maybe crucial for my goals. When I know that, then I can also know that I need to drop B, even though I like them and they're important and they're wonderful, but I need to drop them if I'm behind on time, because I need to protect the A's. If I don't have that spontaneously, I'll protect the sequential next activity. And then with time delay might pile up, and I will sacrifice some of the activities towards the end or closing. And with that, I'll actually sacrifice something really, really important. So because of that, I really need that super sharp clarity. And let's say there shouldn't be like 1 B and 10 A's. They should be fairly balanced. It can be a bit more A's than half, but not much more than half. So I want to have super clarity there to see what do I need to protect. I can design this clarity after I design my training agenda and training plan, and I can go back to it and then just mark, this is A, this is A, this is A, this is B. I don't need to know that right from the beginning, even though if I design according with goals in mind, I will know it fairly early. Okay, that was our tip number 3. Moving on to number 5. Number 5 is probably the biggest trap that happens for trainers and in training, and that is squeezing in too much. We all know it, we've all done it, we all do it even though we know we shouldn't. It's about overwhelming with just squeezing in all the content we can, or all the exercises, or all the activities, or all the questions we can, because we fall a little bit in love with all these amazing activities and we want to give as much as we can to our participant. And then we squeeze so much that we create a lot of time pressure. And while we have many meaningful activities in our agenda now, we also have them so many that we have to rush through all of them, that we have no freedom to extend some if the conversation gets really interesting, that we have no freedom to be flexible when participants drop in an additional question or diverge from our activity because of some interesting insight that they had. Because of this, we really want to plan with a bit more space and with less overwhelm. We want to ask, is really all of this necessary in our agenda? Is it all of it crucial? Is it like, does it allow for some breathing space, or is it too packed? And really, this is one of the biggest traps. So always check your agenda for that and be very mindful of it, because content covered is not the same as content learned. If we want people to really learn, we need to also allow space for processing and not just space to drop that content in there. And this ties very much right into my tip number 5, which is to include some buffers. And by buffers, I mean, on one side, few minutes here and there that are free and without a plan, that will allow you to actually be flexible, to extend something, to waste a bit of time, to waste some time in transition between activities, to allow for an extra question you didn't expect, or logistical little thing to deal with, or to allow the activity to extend a bit. But buffers can also mean to just allow for just a little bit of breathing time, to allow people time to process, to take a few deep breaths, to maybe even invite them to take a deep breath, maybe stretch a bit between the activity, grab some water to maintain their energy. So on one side, you want buffers to actually have flexibility, to extend things a bit, but on the other side, you also want to have them for any unexpected things that might happen. And on third side, you also want to have them to allow for more integration and moment to tackle energy and keep energy in mind. Having that said, it wouldn't be fair if I didn't do a mini buffer here, right? So I want to invite you, after sharing this tip number 5, to maybe take a nice deep breath and take a moment to think about first 5 tips I shared. Which of them is actually most important for you? Is it to keep the session goals and activity goals a bit more in mind? Is it to connect those goals with activities a bit better and a bit more? Is it to have more clarity on your priorities, A priorities and B priorities, and not have too many Bs in your agenda? Is it to plan a bit more moderately in terms of amount of activities? Or is it to add just some extra little buffers throughout your agenda? This was one type of tips. Now I'm moving in a little bit different perspective. And I still want to remind you, you can download the handout also to follow more easily, or to get reminded of any of the tips, or maybe to reflect on them a little bit for yourself, which one do you actually want to implement next. And of course, I want to invite you, if you're enjoying this topic and enjoying this episode, to click that like, to subscribe, to add on any comments you might have. As this is still one of the very first episodes on Trainer's Toolbox channel, it very much helps to keep in touch this way and to support other people and other trainers and facilitators to also discover the podcast. But it will also uncover for you when the next episode comes out. Next one should be on building trust, and then I'm also planning some on storytelling, on how to do closing well. So that subscribe button will also enable you to keep in mind to know when the next episode comes. Now, moving on to the tip number 6. Test, test, test. This is especially about activities you've never done before. If you have a new activity you discovered, or maybe you participated in it but never actually delivered it, this is a really crucial step to know and expect also how the activity will develop, but especially how will it work out in time management. And to be fair, you can also assess how much time an activity will take, even without testing it. And the more experience you have, the more and more precisely you can assess that. But nothing beats good old testing. So you can test an activity for yourself on your own, if it's more of different questions for reflection or certain steps that people will need to do. Or you can test it with a group of friends, group of other trainers. It's something we love doing in Trainers Conversations community, testing different activities, and also in Facilitation Bootcamp, if you have an activities you want to test. So in Advanced Facilitation Training, sorry, I keep calling it Facilitation Bootcamp. Those are some of the places where I provide space for you and other trainers to test that. But you can always simply gather a couple of your friends, trainers, and test it with them. But testing will really help you understand how the activity might take off, and you still don't want to take that time as definite. You know, if it took 15 minutes, it doesn't mean it will take 15 minutes with every group and every individual. But you will also recognize what are some of the potential pitfalls, what are the spaces where things might get extended or complicated. So testing will give you a lot of insights. So if it's activity that's at all risky or new to you, highly recommend it to actually test it. Tip number 7 is to really adjust also to the group needs. And here, what I really just want to call you for is not to be overly rigid, not to think that the good time management is when we follow our agenda to the letter. No, good time management is when we achieve our learning goals and when we fulfill the needs that the group and individual have, that enables them to actually assimilate and integrate and process those learnings. Because of that, sticking to agenda rigidly is not a time management that is successful and the best time management. Instead, time management that allows us to be flexible and adjust and adapt to group needs and play with those goals in mind, but still being very flexible, avoid rigidity. That is the time management that is truly a superpower. So I want to invite you to really always keep this in mind, that to move on smoothly through the workshop with every step in your agenda does not mean you're managing the learning process well. And time management should be a servant to the learning process, not the boss of a rigid agenda. Maybe it's obvious to some, but I think it's still really important to voice it out. Tip number 8, we are halfway in. I hope you're still with me. If you need a little break, click pause, come back to it later. Tip number 8 is to keep different options in mind. And here I'm talking about a bit of preparation. When you do your agenda, to already take a moment to look into different activities, maybe at the same time when you're marking them with A and B, and when you're wondering which ones should I test. Then you also want to explore what are my options in terms of flexibility for different activities. Which of these activities is really fixed in terms of the time that it takes and needs? Which of these activities I really need to protect, I don't know, fixed 15 minutes or 20 minutes for? Which of these activities is a bit dangerous and it might escalate, but I want to protect it if it does it because it's really important. So which of these is a bit of a minefield around which I need to protect more flexibility? And which of these activities can really be shortened easily, which is my joker, you know, that I can still do it without kicking it out, but I can play it in much shorter version if needed and it will still be useful. These are the options that I really want to keep in mind and explore in advance. I want to know it before my workshop, because in the workshop, when I need to be flexible, it's really hard to keep an eye on the group, on the process, on where are we right now, on the content potentially, or giving clear instructions for the activities. And next to all of that, to also keep thinking, hey, and where can I be flexible? Which of these could I shorten? Hey, I'm a bit behind on time. Which of the next 5 steps or activities can I actually shorten? So I really, really, really want to know this ahead. And when I realize I'm a bit behind on time or forward, which is more rare, but that I'm going a bit forward on time, then I want to see, hey, which of these, what is my flexibility? Which is my joker? Which can I rely on? So by preparing this in time, I'm saving my brain cycles and focus to be able to be really present on the workshop because I already know my options. A bit related is to design truly a joker activity if it suits your agenda and your learning goal. And basically save that activity for somewhere towards the end. This is an ideal scenario. This is not something I would recommend in every workshop. This is really if I have something that fits really well in terms of learning goals, I might try to plan it like that, especially if I have risky activities before. And that is to have this big activity that is very flexible and be able to make it much longer or much shorter, and it will still have a value. Maybe it's different if I play it in the format of 1, 2, 4 all, where basically is the format where people first reflect individually, then they talk in pairs, then they talk in groups of 4, then in the end we also share in the plenary, which will take like maybe half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour, depending on what they're doing exactly. And maybe that's something that instead I can shorten and cut down to just pair discussions, and it will take 3 minutes, or anything in between, reflection and pair discussions, so it takes like 6 minutes, or reflections and pairs and plenary, so it will take like 10 minutes. So that one I can really scale from half an hour of really deep thinking and broad thinking about the whole workshop to maybe much shorter format of quick reflection and quicker processing in maybe 2 quick steps. When I have a big flexible activity like that, it will be valuable at any point in my agenda, but it will be especially valuable if I can place it towards the end of the workshop, because then I can be really flexible with my time management, and then I know I have that joker towards the end that I can play in fairly fast. But this one works only if you combine it with tip number 10, have milestones. Having clear milestones of at what point in terms of the clock do you need to reach a specific point in your agenda. This will help you so much to be flexible between those milestones. And the really important thing is to decide on the latest time that each key activity should start and end. For example, so I'll plan my milestones from the end. For example, I'll start with knowing that I need to protect 20 minutes for closing. And maybe ideally, I want my closing to be 30 minutes. And I wrote in my training agenda that I will start closing 30 minutes before the end. But I also have a milestone that the latest I need to reach that point is actually 20 minutes before the end. And then based on that, let's say I have a big activity right before closing that's not really flexible and that takes 20 minutes. Then I know that my ideal milestone to reach that activity is 50 minutes before the end, 20 for the activity and 30 for closing. But that also my final call milestone is 40 minutes to reach that place. And that final call, final moment I need to reach it, that's the really important milestone, because that's when things will get compromised and sabotaged if I don't reach that. So go through your agenda, have the real clock like you would, but in that real clock also highlight what are the main crucial points for which you need to make sure that happen in time so nothing would get compromised. And then also next to them, add an alternative latest point when you should reach them, next to that ideal point that you already marked. Don't have too many milestones through the agenda, because then that will be too difficult to track and manage. So you want to have maybe 4 big milestones, When should you be around the middle of the agenda? When should you be reaching some really big and important activity? When should you be reaching closing? If you have too many, it will only make your life complicated. But having few will really save your closing and save your time management. Now, I still have 5 tips to share. I want to invite you here again for a nice deep breath. And just to think briefly from the next 5 I shared, which ones are most important to you? Test the new activities. Or maybe tip number 7, which was to adjust more to the group, to tune in more into the group needs and not be rigid. Or number 8, to always keep your options in mind ahead of time, which activities are flexible and which ones should you stick with rigidly. 9 was to design big flexible activity somewhere towards the end, so you have a joker there. And number 10 was to mark down those milestones, crucial, maybe 4, maybe 5 milestones throughout your agenda that you really want to keep in mind. And then you don't have to keep an eye on the clock for every activity and for every step, but just for those crucial milestones. Now with that, I'm moving into our final 5. Tip number 11, very straightforward one. Have a clock, have a physical clock with you on your desk or on the wall. Like, I do recommend having it on the desk or on the wall, not just on your hand or on your phone, because you don't want to be looking at your hand watch all the time. You don't want to have people sharing and you need to check your time, so you look on your clock, because they'll get that as a hint they should speed up or shut up, right? They'll get that as a hint that we are behind time. So you want to have a clock somewhere on the wall or on your desk, like somewhere on the desk or on somewhere aside next to your materials. And you want to make sure you position it in a way that you can glance it really easily, so you can be checking it throughout different discussions and not just while participants are busy with different activities. So have it really somewhere where it's easy to glance and where you can always come back to it easily and check in your time. That one is quite straightforward, but it can really save you. So I know many trainers who actually carry their small desk clock with them with their trainers' materials. Tip number 12. We're kind of entering the last 4 that are connected here. Tip number 12 is share the ownership of time management with your participants. And by that, I do not mean burden them by asking them to keep an eye on the clock all the time. But I do mean give them clarity why and what kind of time we are dedicating to certain activity, to certain discussion, to certain thing they're doing on their own, and communicate clearly why that timeline is important. So you can say something like, we'll spend around 20 minutes on this discussion, just so we exchange some thoughts, and we don't drain, if we take it longer, we will drain the ideas a bit and the energy. So we'll aim for 15-20 minutes, just to, keep it dynamic, but still provide enough space to share. This is not a hard timeline, but just for you to have an expectation. So maybe you don't want to say it in quite that many words, but you do want to give clarity. Hey, this will be a very short, dynamic, quick discussion. Hey, this will be really deep sharing with as much space as you want. And this will enable them to know if they're reluctant, should they share a bit longer story or not? Should they introduce their example, or better to skip it? This will help them to understand. If you say this will be very quick and short round of sharing, they'll know it's better to skip it. Say this is really space to go in deep and share a lot, they will know they can really unleash their, sharing and not be burdened by the time. With this, you give them freedom and you give them more safety and confirmation of what they need to do, but you're also helping yourself to time manage, because it will be much easier to stop them and say, hey, I see we still have many ideas, but we already spent those 20 minutes on these discussions. If we extend it, we need to sacrifice something else, or maybe asking them, would you like to extend it? But then we will shorten this other part. Also, one part where I love sharing ownership with participants, and that also plays into time management, is by giving them choice. Would you like to stay with this, or would you like us to continue? But I can only give them choice if it's an educated choice, which means I also need to make them aware of what is coming up next and what will we need to shorten or sacrifice if we stay with this. So they don't just say, yeah, I like this, I'll stay with it, but they also know what is kind of the price of it and what are we exchanging it for. So when I give them a choice, it will never be, do you want to stay with this or not? It will always be, would you prefer to stay a bit longer with this reflection or discussion or activity? Or would you prefer that we make sure that we do this later, that we cover this specific thing that is on our agenda later, that we have time for something else specific that I name later on? Only that way can they truly share an ownership with me. But with this, it's really important also for me that I don't burden them, that if I say this discussion is 20 minutes, that now they think they have to pay attention, did 20 minutes passed, but that I'm just communicating clarity of expectation of how deep and broad we can go and how much space can they take in terms of the time. I hope this makes sense. And with tip number 3, it's very connected. It's about providing clarity to them. So clearly showing how much time is allocated for each activity or discussion. Now, let's be very clear. I do never want to do this at the beginning. I don't want to give an agenda and lock myself into a rigid agenda by saying, then we're going to do activity number 1 and it's going to take 20 minutes. And then we're going to debrief it and that's going to take 10 minutes. No, 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 no. My agenda is always more goal-oriented and oriented in terms of big topics and roughly methodology. So I'll say maybe when I'm sharing agenda, I'll name the main big bits of the flow of the session. And I'll say if we'll have a lot of discussions or reflections or activities or individual work or small group work or whatever. I will kind of name that a little bit. But I won't lock myself into any specific activity or specific time for activity because I want to have flexibility to adapt to whatever develops. But when I'm entering a specific activity, then I want to give them clarity. How long will that take? Then I want to be very clear. We have 10 minutes for this. We have 20 minutes. We have 10 minutes, but we can extend if needed because this is really important. Or let's plan with this. So I do want to give a lot of that, a lot of clarity at the beginning of each activity of what is to be expected from that activity. Quite connected to the previous one. And now with the final 2 tips to share, one more related to communication about time, and then one more internal tip for you. Number 14, related to communication to the group. I always want to say the time in multiple ways if it's something where they need to manage the time. Let me be more specific. When I'm letting them go for a break, I will say, now we'll take 15 minutes break, so we'll be back at 12:40. Okay, I named it how long will it be, and I also named at what time it will finish. And ideally, I also want to put it on the wall or virtual wall, depends in which space we are, the number at what time we are back, or in chat, back at 12:40 or something like that. And the same thing for activities that are like small group activities, possibly also individual activities, and or breakouts or anything like that. I want to say by what time will we end and what will be the duration of activity. Duration of activity will give them a feeling. How deep and long can they go for? Should they speed up a bit, keep it dynamic, or do they have a lot of time to figure it out? But by naming at what time we will end, if they were really focused on my instructions and so on, it will really help them if they didn't look at the clock when they entered the breakout. So you always want to communicate both. Of course, next to that, I also want to communicate sometime before the end of an activity to give them a warning to have time to wrap it up nicely, like 5 minutes before the end or 2 minutes before the end, depending on how long is the whole activity. I don't want to be interrupting them too much with that, but I do want to give that reminder, at least one reminder a couple of minutes before the end, but also giving them more of this ownership by saying it in 2 different ways clearly, and ideally also posting it somewhere on the wall or in the chat is a good idea. I personally don't like to post timer on slide or on the wall or on the any virtual or live slide, because I feel like it creates a bit of pressure for people, like, seeing 15 minutes and then counting down. So I prefer to post the ending time, like we're finishing at 12:40. And then we have a clock on the wall ideally, or not. If not, they usually have somebody in the group has a clock, so they'll still be able to keep an eye. And I will also invite them, if they ever need to ask me how much time they have left. So I really want to communicate time efficiently, but also in multiple ways, clearly, so they have, if they're a bit distracted, they still can come back to it. And then finally, tip number 15, really key one to keep developing your skills of better time management, to really keep flexing that muscle and becoming better and better with more experience. And that is to actually track the real time. You probably always have a bit of a timeline and agenda written down, how long different activities will take, when are you moving to different blocks. But really, really important thing is also to actually note down how much did they take in reality. And during the workshop, you just want to note that down. If you have printed agenda, just write it down briefly somewhere, just the number and the name of activity you started, couple of times throughout the day, how long an activity took, or just the name, when it started, when it ended. Very briefly making those notes when you have a chance. And then after the workshop, you will actually look into it. How did it align with your agenda? Where did you overestimate or underestimate? Which activity went longer? So you will know how to plan better for the next time. You will maybe also notice some points there where you actually waste some time, like transition between big group into small groups. It can take a minute if you're efficient, or it can take 5 minutes or even more if you don't guide it efficiently and well, and people are dragging their feet a bit and they're a bit indecisive. And having maybe 3 or 4 activities where you waste 5 minutes will cost you like 20 minutes altogether. So you also want to notice, by tracking your real time, where are you wasting some time? Where did you lose some time? Because that's 20 minutes you could really spend on valuable discussion. So for me, I want to provide a lot of space for meaningful places. I want them to feel abundance of time in different activities when we actually enter the activity or discussion or reflection or a certain process. But I also want to keep them quick and efficient with coming back from breaks, with transition to different space in the room, with grabbing some materials, with kickstarting different activity. And often I'll communicate that clearly at the beginning of the workshop, that we want to be efficient about logistics so we could be abundant about things that truly matter. I hope this makes sense to you. I really hope you managed to grab some useful and valuable tips out of these 15. If not, I still invite you to take a moment to reflect on them. You can download the handout. You can find the link into the description of the episode, and there you can download the list of all the 15 tips. And I would invite you to name 1 or 2, for start, just 1 or 2, that you really want to start implementing in your next workshop. If you're a little bit indecisive, unsure where to start, I would say start with milestones, clear priorities, A versus B, and then also with tracking real time. I think these 3 things are really, really most important strategies that you want to keep in mind. Now, in the end, this all comes down a lot to practice, 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 and experience, experience, and experience. Even if you do things and activities every time differently because you adapt to the group, with experience you develop more feeling for the time and more intuition when you have more space to extend and when the process deserves it and when to actually speed up a little bit. If you wish to also practice, there are 2 places where you can do that also with me. One of them is on Train the Trainer course, where throughout this long and comprehensive course, on which trainers build truly strong foundations for their training design and training delivery, you do a lot of practical mini sessions there. You're in the shoes of trainer throughout the course, and you keep practicing time management in fairly strict and challenging format, but that really helps you build up those skills. Or an alternative where you can also work on those skills together with me is on our Facilitation Bootcamp, or in its official name, Advanced Facilitation Training. That is 2 days live training in which we immerse ourselves as a group of facilitators, 9 of us, including me. We immerse ourselves into exploring different tools and methods, playing, exchanging tips. And again, for a good portion of that training, you are in the shoes of facilitator. You practice your time management, you get some good tips from others and feedback, and you can really experiment with some of the activities in which you want to get better with managing your time. So by all means, you might check those places. They're also posted in the description. You might want to join me for one of these, and you can always get in touch. It's easiest to do it through LinkedIn, or maybe if you're on Trainers Toolbox newsletter, which you should definitely be on, you can always reply to one of the newsletters and ask more about any of the courses, events, or provide any of the feedback to the podcast episodes. I will highly appreciate feedback and ideas to keep improving what I can share with you. So also remember to subscribe, like the episode, help me out, get it out there, and also, navigate me a bit by sharing which episode you liked best and which one was most valuable tip for you. See you soon in one of the future episodes. Thank you for exploring this topic with me. I hope you found some exciting ideas and valuable tools that you will use already today. Remember, they only work if you put them in practice, but then they make all the difference. If you enjoy Trainers Toolbox podcast, do leave a rating and review. It does mean a lot. And if you haven't done it yet,
Click on the links in the episode descriptions and discover free materials and valuable resources to dive in deeper. See you in the next episode or at Trainer's Toolbox newsletter.